The story begins in a dungeon where an underground labyrinth feeds itself with the energy of the dead and creates bait. There are always an abundance of monsters around her. For in the heart of the dungeon lies the artifact. And the older and more dangerous the dungeon, the stronger and more expensive its artifact. After all, in recent years, instead of taking care of the population, many kingdoms have focused on controlling dungeons and finding artifacts. In the midst of the forest, a knight wanted to touch the flower, but the explorer said it could sting him and inject poison into his blood. The guy was surprised and said he understood and apologized. The researcher also added that they should not take unnecessary steps without orders when they approached the dungeon. Suddenly, Explorer Stitch turned around and seemed to see the place they needed. In front of them was a dungeon that was one of the oldest in this kingdom. A prince on horseback said to unpack the baggage and line up the soldiers, for they would enter as soon as they were prepared. He also added that it took them a whole week to get here. That's more than enough time for the brothers to try all their tricks. Stitch watched this conversation and thought that the prince was very cool since he had so many soldiers. After all, he was also able to hire a Class A researcher. There's no reason for the guy to turn down the offer, because he'll get his share of it. This dungeon is just as dangerous as a ranked dungeons. The guy couldn't even imagine what could be inside. However, with such power and number of knights, he thinks it is quite possible. Meanwhile, the prince looked around and shouted for Stitch to stay put and move out. The guy had an active ability finding the shortest path to his destination. This ability was the quality of an A-grade researcher. Abilities beyond the human senses are ultrasonic detection and vibration detection. These abilities are like a magician's clairvoyance, what the guy does for a living, because other people can't see it. One of the knights said that Stitch didn't look trustworthy, and could they really trust him? But the partner replied that the master wouldn't just hire him, so one should just go after him. After a while, Stitch told all the knights that he would go through this place first. He also added, when they walk, let them look carefully under their feet, but to beware of the ceiling. At this point, everyone looked up and asked how Stitch knew about it. But the lad replied that every time he took a step, he heard the creaking of springs behind the wall. Surely these must be traps that have already rusted. But the floor can still be connected to the trap, so have the guys stick to the walls when moving. The knight stood in shock and did not understand how the guy was able to hear this, and whether such a thing was even possible. After a while, the guy thought that in the largest part of the dungeon there was a protector guarding the artifact. And it's the final stage that Stitch as an explorer can't break through on his own. One of the lead knights shouted for the shield bearers to move to the front of the formation. After that, he asked the researcher how they would awaken the dungeon protector. But the guy replied that it was very simple, you just had to give him a sign. Suddenly, a huge monster named Tarask appeared out of nowhere and started getting angry. One of the commanders shouted for no one to panic, and ordered the first row to move forward. This monster started attacking the knight with flames, and the commander shouted for them to stop it from breaking through. The knights then activated the wall of shields, and this ability grants resistance against physical and magical attacks. Also, the crossbowmen from the back row were ordered to aim directly at the enemy's mouth. But one of the knights shouted that the fire was too strong. Because of poor visibility and wind pressure, it is hard to shoot accurately. The commander thought that the monster was much stronger than he thought. They can only aim for its mouth by using their senses. After that, they asked the researcher if he could use some ability to target the opponent's mouth. But the man replied that he had never used anything like that. And the commander asked again if he could target. Stitch thought he couldn't have predicted this would happen. But since he's an A-grade researcher, he should try it. Before the fire spread any further, the guy decided to just aim for the center and used animal instinct. What was his surprise that he hit right on target, and he succeeded. The commander yelled for the boys to keep their focus, for it was just beginning. Suddenly, they looked at the evil monster and realized that fire wasn't the main problem. It was incomprehensible to everyone where this monster got so much strength, and how such a thing was even possible. All the knights together fired at this monster, and none of their attacks go through its armor. After a few seconds, the commander shouted for everyone to use a shield strike and knock him down. Since the monster's back is hard, it will be hard for him to get up. As soon as the monster wanted to destroy the researcher, all the knights activated a shield strike. At this time, the commander started attacking the monster and ordered that the knights use this strike once more. After that, Mr. Harold flew into the air at the most opportune moment and swung his sword. After a moment, the Lord raised his sword and said that they had won. They had destroyed this monster. Stitch was surprised that they had done this, and if he would finally see the artifact with his own eyes. On the way back, the Lord asked Stitch if he had never managed to test at least one dungeon. The guy had no problem bypassing all the traps, but he had never been able to reach the heart of the dungeon before. The Lord believes the dungeon protector was to blame, if he's right. So it turns out this is the first artifact that Guy's ever seen live. And since that was the case, then the gentleman suggested that the researcher touch it.
Stitch asked if the Lord didn't think the guy could just take that artifact and run away.
But the gentleman replied that if such a thing happened, Stitch would pay with his life if he was caught. The guy thought that everything besides the dungeon artifact is his. Even without taking the artifact into account, it's a great profit, and nothing should happen. Then he decided to reach right into this artifact and see what happens next. As soon as he touched, an unknown force began to attack Stitch and take away his power. After that, the guy fell to the floor, and the gentleman apologized for it. He also added that artifacts, the sources of all kinds of negative energy, are not just put into people's hands. The gentleman then stepped on the guy's hand and said they wouldn't forget his help. The second assistant took a closer look and said that it seemed the curse had already been lifted. The gentleman replied that was great, and now they needed to get out of here. As soon as he picked up the artifact, he wondered if it was veins. At this point, something inexplicable began to happen, and a high risk was discovered. The aide ordered everyone to retreat and began to draw his sword. But that didn't help either, because the sword just went right through. After that, he shouted for the crossbowmen to attack, but that was also useless as nothing was working. The herald wondered if this Sino-Ecotype type was really a Sino-Ecotype. If so, he's a damn scumbag. Suddenly he wondered if the artifact's reaction had already started to take effect. The aide yelled that the dungeon was collapsing too fast, and they needed to run. He also added that you need to hurry up and use the scroll. The herald was surprised that so much effort had been made to come here and get it, and this scumbag just took it all and ruined it. Now all we have to do is run. Meanwhile, the artifact recognized Stitch as his partner, and the guy was washed ashore in an obscure area. He woke up and couldn't understand anything because it was too dark. His body felt like it was being torn apart. Suddenly he looked at his hand and wondered why the ring was on his finger. After all, after being tricked by the herald and touching the ring, he should have died. Suddenly some voice said that everything was right and our hero was dead. As it turned out, it was an artifact, and he called Stitch his partner. Meanwhile, the herald wondered if they were the only ones who had managed to escape and survived. He started to get really freaked out, and his partner started to calm him down, but he asked why his partner was using the scroll. The guy replied that things were quite bad, and they wouldn't have gotten out of there otherwise. But the herald replied that surely his brothers knew that he had led a soldier. Therefore he was not to allow himself to be lost. He still couldn't believe his eyes that the corpse had returned to its former life, and no normal artifact can move like that when its master is dead. This was the first time Balstock had encountered such a thing. If it wasn't a parasitic type, was it really an independent artifact? But the herald replied that it's neither. It's a symbiotic type artifact, but the partner had never heard of it. Herald added that existing artifacts are generally divided into two types, with the most common type being independent. Most of all, there are artifacts of this type that obey the will of the owner, so it is easy to use them as a tool. And the other, it's a parasitic type, although it can be stronger. But when the host dies, the artifact also self-destructs. Also, the guy added that these are the two commonly known types. However, there is another exceptional symbiotic type. Such artifacts can revive dead hosts on their own. Apparently this was the resurrection they had seen with their own eyes. But the partner said that no matter how strong the artifact was, it was hard to believe that in the middle of the dungeon, he was able to survive. Even though his partner is sure the guy is dead, the herald says it would be great if it were true. In the meantime, they need to get back to the capital. And after a while, they noticed that there were wanted notices for Stitch posted everywhere in every town. Meanwhile, our hero didn't realize what he was supposed to do here now. Suddenly the guy heard a voice saying that someone was giving up something. He didn't understand what was going on, and suddenly the artifact said that it prevented our hero from being killed by the passive soul-saving ability. Plus, he tweaked a few things and understood all of his characteristics. The artifact said he was just talking about losing some of his energy because of the guy, and called him an unskilled soup. Stitch was surprised and asked what it was and why he was hearing his voices in his head. In response, the very same artifact said his name was Memento Mortem. Our hero realized that he was this artifact, and asked if there were any other artifacts that had consciousness like him. But also Stitch was happy that they could communicate, and asked what else they could do with him. The guy was wondering how many unique abilities he had, since usually each artifact rolled for one unique ability. But he could change them for a good price, and if the ability is useful, it will cost more. And Artifact replied, if it functions properly, you can get it for at least 40. A guy will, because a person can't have more than 10 abilities his whole life. Even with amplification, the limit doesn't exceed 20. But he wondered if he had so many abilities under his control with one artifact. So he asked if he could use some now, and Artifact replied that he could. but he had already spent all the mana to restore Stitch. After a short conversation, our hero started asking what mana was. But suddenly the artifact remembered something and said that our hero has only 12 hours left before he dies. Our hero was surprised and said that he thought the artifact had resurrected him, and why would he die again? But the artifact replied that as long as he didn't die, Stitch would live. And vice versa. As long as Stitch's heart beats, the artifact will not disappear. But if the artifact doesn't have mana, they're both a shout-out. Did the guy really think he'd come back to life for a thank you? Stitch started to get angry, saying he should have been warned about this earlier, and asked what if they both died if the artifact ran out of mana. But the artifact replied that he was not a mere mortal, for he was not interested in life. He slept peacefully until our hero came and woke him up. But if he's having a hard time surviving, he'll share his strength. But let him remember that just because he escorted him doesn't make him the master of the artifact. And it's Stitch who's clinging to life here. The guy said he understood. Now let the artifact tell him how to restore his mana. Thoth replied that he needed to use Curse Devours against weak monsters or cursed tools. Our hero didn't know about the cursed tools, but as it turns out, all he needs to do is catch a couple monsters. Artifact added that he had 11 hours and 55 minutes left, so let the guy hurry up. Already on the way, he thought that there must be many monsters near the dungeon. But he remembered again that his stats were low. That's when he realized he'd have to find these monsters himself. He thought to look for footprints, and sure enough the monsters left these. Hearing some kind of stench, he realized it must be a great wolf. After that, he wondered how much longer the downgrade would last. The artifact responded with another 1 minute and 30 seconds, and it was unexpectedly short. The characteristic reduction is applied when there is no mana. It's a kind of reset. The stronger the ability, the further the downgrade, and the guy realized he still had time. Besides, there's only one wolf. It'd be harder if there were more than one. Suddenly, the artifact reminded us that our hero hadn't recovered, and the guy asked if he had any attack abilities. The artifact replied that there is one, and it's a basic ability that combat maggies use. Our hero asked how many bullets he could shoot, and as it turned out, only one. So Stitch decided that he needed to concentrate as much as possible. But since that's the case, he should aim for the heart and lungs. If he hits the right place, the wolf will pass out. After that, they can finish him off, and after that, they can restore mana. Since they only have one chance, Stitch decided to launch an attack, and Artifact activated an air bullet. Seeing this, the guy was surprised and couldn't believe his eyes. The guy realized it was just basic magic and wondered what that power was. Hadn't he asked to shoot when he was ready? The artifact replied that it was more than just a magical ornament with some abilities to him. Let the guy take it and shoot it. With a little thought, the heater said to let them forget about it. After that, our hero pointed his hand right in front of this beast, and they started activating devouring curses. Meanwhile, in the presence of the royal army of Venetians, King Badi Rusa has 3 offspring. The first is the Raptors, the second is Alfred, and the third is the Herald. Since Raptor is their eldest prince, he is naturally the first claimant to the throne. So the middle and the youngest try to prove their superiority in all sorts of ways. Getting an artifact is a great way to make a name for yourself. But now, the Herald will be seen as a carefree companion. On the drive back, the aide asked what the Herald was pondering, and the aide said the soothsayer. The aide asked if he was talking about Prince Alfred's henchman, and he assumed his name was Conrad. The Herald had put too much trust in the information provided by the so-called Alliance, and the fact that the curse lay on the artifact turned out to be true. The Herald also added that they don't know yet if they did it on purpose or not. There is nothing he can do about it. The aide said not to let the prince worry about it for nothing. After all, he has enough experience on the battlefield, and he will definitely overcome everything. But he couldn't believe that politics was harder than the battlefield. How much time had passed and he still wasn't used to it. Meanwhile, our hero began to heal, and he asked the artifact if it was enough. The artifact replied that not quite, but it would do for now. But our hero asked if it had only 15% charge for destroying the wolf. Stitch wondered if he wouldn't run out of abilities if he used it 3 times. He figured those people must be looking for him now, since he had taken the artifact with him. He was more concerned with where to settle down now. So before he enters the dungeon, we need to get his belongings. There were 2 guards standing near the entrance, and if he just walked, he would be caught. Suddenly our hero noticed that there was catgrass growing nearby, and his plan must be working. He wants to allow fire first, and then enhance the effect with an elemental jump. Should be a cool creation, though it will only work on humans. Suddenly the guards noticed some smoke behind them and wondered where it had come from. Watching this, our hero noticed that the guards were already starting to faint and fall asleep. The artifact said our hero is doing well, and his head is working well. Stitch replied that this was realistic, as he had traveled so many places and was already an experienced explorer. Suddenly he saw that the reward for his head was 400 crowns, but that didn't bother him much, because now he has bigger problems. He can't believe he's become a wanted criminal in one day. He doesn't know how many flyers have been posted around the neighborhood, but it's clear to a fool that he can't live a normal life in this village. Also, Stitch realized, as long as he had the ring on his finger, he could somehow get by. Though it would be easier to leave the kingdom, but it's also not in his nature to just run away with his tail between his legs. Then Artifact asked how our hero wanted revenge. Stitch replied that anyone would be eager, except for complete lazy people. And Artifact replied that it was already more interesting. Since our hero wants to, he can help him. Stitch asked what the hell he was talking about, since he could only use 4 abilities right now. Curse Burn is an ability that allows you to get rid of endless curses and sources of evil. And it's an ability that doesn't just happen. The artifact added that its verbal abilities depend on the amount of mana absorbed, and let our hero think hard about what the point is. At this time, he realized that the more you absorb, the stronger you get. If you absorb something with a lot of mana, you get up a lot stronger. Stitch asked if the artifact could also absorb artifacts, but as it turned out, it can transfer its power to our hero. So the artifact asked that the guy help him get hold of more artifacts. Only then will his vengeance be accomplished, and he will gain power. He added that even one hit would be enough on Geralda. But Stitch wondered if he did that, if he could really finish that fool off right with his own hands. The artifact added that it was just that, and it would give our hero a taste of what it was like to smear opponents on the wall. Meanwhile, some knight was sitting in a cafe and asked where he could buy good leather here and at a normal price. But the man said you should ask for such things on the black market, although they tried to sell it to the guy for a lot of money. He added that they asked for at least 500 crowns on average. The man then decided to recommend a good researcher to him. Suddenly he noticed a wanted ad on the table, and the man said he could hang it on the wall if he wanted. He recognized Stitch in that ad, and wondered what he had done wrong. Meanwhile, our hero saw the guards handing out a name tag to those who went inside. He realized that there was always a secret passage in such villages. The artifact asked our hero what he was forgetting in this village. He thought that our hero had listened to him, and was heading for the dungeon. But he replied that going into the dungeon without an escape scroll is self-destruction. That's why he doesn't want to die before his time. Artifact then asked if he was talking about a scroll like those guys had. It was exactly like that, and there were tons of offers on the market, but the transactions are monitored so that this is not abused. So Artifact asked what our hero was going to do. Stitch told Artifact not to worry, because he'd already found him. He knows this secret passage like the back of his hand. He then said the phrase "goblins eat freshwater base," and it turned out to be such a password. The entrance to the dungeon asked who our hero was, and if he had really been here 3 months ago. Our hero apologized and said he hadn't looked in for a while, as there was no business in these parts. As it turned out, the man was inside and started hugging our hero, saying that such a password should be memorized properly. Stitch replied that it did get around, and he had urgent business to attend to, and couldn't think of anything else. The man started laughing and asked if our hero was the one who said the back door wasn't for him. But the man was still happy for him. He walked him inside and asked if the guy wanted a shot to welcome him. But Stitch replied that it would be a little later, he needed to get settled in here first. The man then asked what more wanted ads were and if our hero had stolen anything. Stitch then laid out what he had gotten on the table and told everyone to hurry up and buy it while it was available. One of the visitors asked how much the discounts are now, and the man replied that it's 600 kroner each. Stitch suggested that the man lend him some of the scrolls, since they wouldn't sell quickly anyway, and he needed the money badly. Our hero added that he needed at least 4 scrolls, and would be able to give them away the day after tomorrow. But the man could not lend them for the reason that he wondered what our hero had stolen, and he could pay 400 crowns himself to clear his name. But Stitch replied that one son of the local king had behaved too brazenly, so he wanted to teach him a lesson. After all, he can't just give the money away. The man replied that it was not very wise to talk about pride for 400 kroner, and he has an acquaintance who knows about discounts, so he can get cheaper ones. If our hero needs anything else, let him ask Clyde, and they'll put the payment in his name. The guy added that he needed to get some more provisions and said thanks. The man then pounded his fist on the table to wake Clyde up and ask him for something. Clyde looked up and wondered why the piece of idiot was banging on the table. Our hero was surprised from the fact that it was not yet evening, and this Clyde was already very drunk. After that, Clyde started crying about how he was selling his stuff for half price, but no one was buying it anyway. He thought it was all because he was a loser. Stitch said he felt like making him a lucrative offer after he said that. Looking at the accessories, he asked what the best weapon here was. Clyde wondered if our hero wanted to buy anything from him, Our hero said he didn't have much money, and let Clyde sell him a cheaper gun, and he would test it out. He also added that he needs a decent weapon for the dungeon. Clyde said that you should choose a weapon that fits in your hand, and then it will be useful. He also added that our hero looked like a tough guy, and offered him a big gun. But Artifact said that this weapon was bad, because the dungeons are mostly narrow passageways. He wouldn't be able to fit in there with such a thing. Stitch started to get angry with Artifact, and the latter told our hero to keep to himself, because only he knows about him. The Artifact told our hero that this dwarf has no magical power, but weapons are another conversation. Stitch asked if the Artifact knew how it worked, and the Artifact replied that it saw things differently. If anything, it's the sword on the far right. Our hero took up this sword and wondered if it was really worth it. The Artifact replied, if used correctly, it wouldn't even look in the direction of a normal weapon. Our hero looked at this sword and said that from the looks of it, you couldn't tell it was unusual. After a while, our hero was already fighting in the dungeon with monsters and thought where they only came from. The Artifact screamed for Stitch to start destroying them even faster. After that, the Artifact activated the Curse Devouring ability and started helping our hero. Stitch thought, it seems he's using the excess energy to grow. And is it really necessary to try to mine lapis lazuli? Once in this mine, the guy wondered if he could carry it all. But he also wondered why there were traps at every turn. If that's the case, he'll use them for parts. Suddenly Stitch heard some sounds behind him and told the Artifact to help him shine a light into the depths. What he saw shocked him. A mineral lizard was standing in front of him and was about to attack him. After a little thought, our hero realized that such a creature could indeed be a mineral lizard. But suddenly this monster started attacking right at him, and the Artifact told our hero to keep his cool. Possessing the ability to resurrect doesn't mean you have to die all the time. Stitch wondered if the nerdy monster had gotten caught and was using poisonous substances and absorbing minerals. That's why his body is stronger than steel. With mid-level strength it can't even be scratched. At this time, the Artifact said that our hero had gone too far, and an air bullet in such a narrow space would cause a collapse. After that, Stitch started running away, and the Artifact said that was great. After all, it's a great chance to test Clyde's weapon. Our hero asked if the Artifact was sure it had to be done right now. The Artifact then said that this was a good time to test it on a mid-level monster. Our hero tensed up and wondered if he could do it. He then began to get closer and closer to this monster and boldly attacked. Stitch's arm even went numb after the blow, even though he only wanted to wake the monster, but the sword stabbed in. Our hero even felt a little sorry for it, even though he bought it with the purpose of testing it. This gas isn't easy to get. There are only 4 capsules left. Cloud did his best on the interior lining, but if you shake them hard enough. Suddenly the Artifact said something was wrong here, and our hero asked what it was. The Artifact added that he couldn't say specifically, but he sensed something amiss. After that, the Artifact told our hero not to relax, for too short a fight could be a trap. Suddenly our hero turned his head around and saw another monster come out at him. That's why he was saying that in a place like this, you can't spend all the capsules and you have to save money. Suddenly Stitch thought that the moment was right, and he should go on the attack. In the moment, our hero noticed that this monster was much stronger than the previous one. The tail alone is worth it. It's starting to get on his nerves. Though compared to Tarask, it's just an ordinary lizard. After our Edge tried sticking a sword into this monster, he realized that its skin was much harder. After that, the Artifact reminded him that he'd told Stitch not to relax, and there was something wrong with that monster too. Our hero added that it is immediately obvious that he is strong, but even he must have weaknesses. Just as our hero was about to say something, some hand encircled his face completely. The Artifact said that even goblin cubs know not to be distracted during battle. So let our hero pull himself together. But Stitch said everything was going according to plan, and asked if mixing the gasoline powder from his left hand and the fireflies from his right hand could make something. He then added that it should work, and so his weaknesses with light ammunition. After a while our hero shouted that he had succeeded. If you put a sword through his mouth he would win. Suddenly the system warned that 95% abnormal body tissue was detected, and the Artifact shouted for our hero to wait. After that, there was some sort of explosion, and the Artifact said to wait, but our hero said it should have been said before he touched it. Stitch then wondered what had happened, and the Artifact replied that its magic had begun to control him. It only means that what made his body abnormal is inside the dungeon, but the Artifact doesn't yet know what it's using to do that. Stitch asked if he needed to be wary of the subsequent monsters exploding. The Artifact replied that he did not deny it. Then he asked if our hero was afraid, but the guy replied that he couldn't be intimidated by such nonsense. After that, he put his hand on the ground and began searching for a path. Suddenly he was surprised, for he had applied beast instinct, but there was no hint. At that moment, he saw the skeleton in front of him eating blue crystals. Our hero wondered if they were monsters, and the artifact said yes. But this monster doesn't react if you don't approach it. Maybe he's just been here a long time, so he's frozen in that pose. The artifact added that this one too. Don't let Stitch even think about going to them, or they might do bad things. Our hero turned around and said that the artifact was correct. At that moment, something sparkled at the monster. As soon as our hero turned around, he saw this skeleton heading straight for him and asked what was wrong with him. As it turned out, this monster started exploding and the artifact was screaming for our hero to run away. Stitch wondered why this happened, since he hadn't even touched it. After that, the artifact told our hero to get up. Suddenly he saw before his eyes a vast valley of minerals, and wondered how much money he could get for them. As soon as he tried to touch one mineral, it saw a spark. At that moment, the artifact became convinced that he was so uneasy. He added that our hero just doesn't feel this strange magical power that fills the entire dungeon. And the deeper they progressed, the stronger she became. It even annoyed the artifact. The further they want to go into the dungeon, those monsters they've previously encountered start reacting faster to stimuli and get blown up. Stitch said that apparently due to the continuous exposure to a strange magical power, they had become more aware of their surroundings. The artifact replied that it was exactly that. And judging by what had happened, it wasn't just monsters. He added that this power also affects all items. Our hero wondered and asked if this meant that this passage was a real minefield. The artifact replied that because of this strong magic, our hero wouldn't be able to use even simple recovery skills. The guy decided to check it out and realized he really wasn't making it. Also, the artifact suggests that this off-topic escape scroll won't work either. If this magic continues to affect the scroll like this, it could conversely drive them even deeper, and now escape is impossible. But that doesn't mean they're Western. The artifact has no idea who unleashed this magic. But destroying this creature will help them get out. Stitch realized he'd have to go even further, and he was glad that there was some hope. Looking up, he sighed and said that in the end he had never been able to find the source of this magic. So the only thing left to check is what's behind the doors. He started to say there was nothing to think about and suggested we just come in. Once inside, he saw something unexplainable, and the artifact said it was Jinn. The artifact told him to take a good look at its core. Then he asked if he couldn't feel anything, since it was another artifact. Spirit is born at the confluence of power and magic. It is simply a collection of elements that have no self-awareness and want to destroy everything in their path. To our hero, it reminded something of natural disasters, and whether his body contains an artifact. Our hero's artifact said that this guardian is the cause of their trouble. His body has fused with the artifact, and they are spraying magic in all directions. That's why the dungeon turned into a minefield, and then it's no easier. Our hero said if he destroyed it, he could get out of here and started running. As soon as he was already close, he felt something inexplicable, and wondered if it would happen again. The artifact warned that this place contained the most of that strange magic. Our hero made it even more powerful. So it's time to get out of here, because this place is about to blow up. At that moment, Stitch opened his mallet and asked what was in it. Well, the artifact further began to remind him that if he wanted to stay alive, then let him run away. Suddenly, the artifact screamed for our hero to run away to the side, and the core began to explode. Our hero said that even a body made entirely of stone would surely have a weak spot in its joints. So he started running to fight, and suddenly saw some rock stuck in the air. After the rock flew into his face, Stitch wondered how he could deliver any damage at all, let alone a full-fledged attack. At this time, the artifact prompted him to aim for the middle where the artifact was. He added that the creature created by fusing artifacts. If you absorb magic by devouring curses, it will exhaust it. Stitch replied that it was easy to say until he got close to him and it wasn't profitable. That's when he said he had to use an air bullet and sprang into action. Stitch wondered if she could get through the artifact and shouted again for the guy to come from the side. At this time, our hero looked up and realized that trouble awaited him. He can't do anything at close range or far range. That's why it's useless. Stitch then decided if this artifact could reflect his sword. He felt sorry that at this distance it should be overthrown, and he struck. Suddenly he realized that he had missed everything, and now needed to be as vigilant as possible. As soon as he hit the floor, he asked why the air bullet didn't work. It should have blown it apart. But the artifact reminded him that magic skills couldn't be used against him at full strength because of the influence of his magic. Suddenly our hero turned around and saw that he was being prepared to be attacked right from all sides. He then began to defend himself with his sword, and the artifact asked if our hero was alive. The guy replied that you couldn't really tell that from him anymore. He felt like he was hitting the ice. Suddenly, the artifact shouted for the guy to turn around and see the attack from the left. But the guy wondered, if he was useless even in this situation, did he even have the right to take revenge? He realized there was no choice. and since none of his attacks were doing any damage, there was only Clyde's weapon to rely on. Stitch thought, if you hit one place purposefully, sooner or later cracks will form in the protective layer. So he realized that even though it was small, he had a chance to win and started attacking. At that moment, he realized if he used the capsule now, there would only be one left to spare. If he missed, he was finished. Looking to the side, the guy realized he needed to aim straight for the crack. Suddenly, he wondered what his opponent was doing that was so incomprehensible. He asked with fear on his face if such a huge thing was going to turn around. At that time, the artifact told our hero to dodge. The guy got really scared and started using animal instinct. At this time, he was very attacked, and the artifact was just about to say something to him. He said his body was starting to react and change. Our hero asked if there was any way to know how long until it completely changes. The artifact replied that 3 minutes max, but depending on its condition, it could be less than a minute. Our hero was surprised and said it was more than enough for the final blow. The body and weapon only have strength left for one blow, which should be decisive. In such a situation, 1 minute is enough. Suddenly, our hero jumped up and the artifact asked what he had in mind. Did he really want to destroy himself? But the guy started attacking, saying it's not funny anymore and don't make jokes like that. At this time, he activated the air bullet and started fighting with his sword. He added that while the opponent was trying so hard to keep the core safe, he had already slowed down and left the top unprotected. That was fine, for his sword went in halfway and that was enough. After that, he took a swipe and was even surprised by it himself. The artifact told our hero not to stand still and move. At this time, our hero wondered if he had tried so hard and almost made it alone, and was about to die so foolishly. He began to think that no one could see such a thing, and it couldn't happen at all. He took the lapis lazuli in his hands, and the artifact told our hero to do something already. The guy started swinging and said he would wipe the stone head into powder. At this time, another huge explosion rang out, after which our hero lay somewhere off to the side. He looked toward his opponent and realized he had cracked. After that, he put his hand down and used devouring curses. At that time, something inexplicable began to happen, and our hero started to run away from there. After a while, he was already outside and was glad that he was able to get out. Stitch wondered if the recovery had worked, and now at least his body was free of abrasions and bruises. He checked that his arms and legs were in place. Clothes after battle should always look like that. At this moment, the system told him that his level had improved, but there was no way he hoped he could improve his animal instinct. Stitch turned to the artifact, for he should be out by now. He must have fallen asleep to be so silent. Suddenly, some kind of table appeared in front of our hero, and he asked in a frightened voice what it was. As he learned more, he wondered if he had grown thanks to the artifact, and why there was so much here. After a while, the boy came to Cloud and he told him that the sword could be repaired. He would even build and strengthen it. Since the master himself says so, it's our hero who needs a little help. He gave spares from the dungeon traps and said there was also loot from the monsters. After that, he took out a bag of gold and said that this is an advance here about 3,000 crowns. Cloud was very surprised and said that he hoped there was enough here to fix and reinforce the weapons, as well as a couple capsules. After that, our hero started walking away, telling him to keep working. A little later, our hero arrived at Dalton's tavern and the man began to greet him. Our hero asked what was the matter, if he hadn't recently scolded him for trashing the dungeon, or maybe it was just that someone had taken a liking to his loot. But the man replied that the black market had already taken a bite, and asked if our hero was interested. The guy replied that he would inquire later sometime and wanted to rest upstairs for a while. The man realized that he didn't think our hero would single-handedly trash the dungeon. Meanwhile, our hero sprawled out on the bed and told the artifact to wake up. Suddenly, this artifact was able to appear in his room and said his head felt like it was in prostration. Our hero asked if it's possible that until he activates the ability, he won't be able to learn anything. The artifact responded that it looks like when he ran into the guy, the artifact rebooted, which sealed most of the skills and abilities. He also noticed something else when Stitch got the artifact yesterday. He said the airfield is the simplest and most basic skill that doesn't evolve in any way. However, he didn't just adjust to our hero, he evolved a new form of air. Stitch said since the artifact couldn't tell him anything new, there was no point in repeating the same thing. It's hard for our hero to explain in words, but it's as if he's remembering something long forgotten. Afterward, the guy asked what kind of aura curse skill he was choosing. But the artifact replied that he would tell them about it when they were defending the next dungeon, and asked when they would be departing. Stitch saw that it wouldn't happen until they took the weapons away from the contribution. But first he said he needed to sleep because he was very tired. In the middle of the night, a man woke him up and told him there was a problem and to let him wake up. As it turned out, Clyde came to them and the guys didn't understand what had happened to him. The man said one of the visitors found him lying in an alley and brought him here, After that, he started pouring some liquid on his face, and our hero started to stop the man, saying that he was hurt. Suddenly, he noticed that this potion had removed all the wounds from Clyde's face, and asked how much it cost. The man replied that it wasn't cheap, but when else to use it if not in cases like this? After Clyde came to his senses, our hero asked how he was feeling. Then he asked who had done this to him. Clyde answered that he didn't remember exactly, but it seemed to have something to do with Derek's figure. One of the attackers he'd seen among his six. The visitors wondered if it was him again, and then the guy asked who Derek was. The man replied that it was one jerk, and he had a nasty temper, but he turned a blind eye to everything. But one time that little brat made a mess of things in public, and the man taught him a lesson. That's probably why he was watching the treasure. But Clyde added that that wasn't all. Those guys took the money Stitch had given him and said something. They said until they put that asshole behind bars, they wouldn't rest. The guys said that our hero should be careful, because there is no chance of anything. But he replied that no one should worry, and he would sort it out himself. Regarding the parts, Clyde added that he turned in advance, and when he came back they attacked him. Stitch then turned to the man to send someone to Clyde's workshop just in case. After that, he said he would be back soon. Already being on the road, the artifact said that for sure our hero is nervous now. But the guy said he just wanted to stretch his bones for once. And the artifact asked if Stitch was going to take out those jerks. The boy replied that if he destroyed everyone he didn't like, he would turn into an animal. But they wouldn't get away with a simple fight either. The artifact said it looked like it would be interesting, and our hero began to activate his animal instinct. Meanwhile, the man who attacked Clyde said he saw everything with his own eyes, and the guards told him to be quiet. They also added that Dalton is a very upstanding citizen, and it's inconvenient to barge in on him because of a complaint at this late hour. Afterward, Derek went back to his associates and said that it didn't work, because the guards told him to come back in the morning. The guys asked why he was going out of his way for some 400 crowns. So now they need to break into the public eye faster. But the boy replied that it wasn't about money at all. He didn't know who Stitch was or what he was doing, but he had to catch him first, and then teach Dalton a lesson. One of the assistants wondered if this was indeed the case, and suddenly he saw our hero behind him. The man figured it was the same kid he was talking about. They were trying to figure out how to find him, and he came on his own. Our hero replied that he should thank them. It had been a long time since he had hit people, and here, as they say, it was a godsend. One guy grabbed our hero and said he was cocky and started swinging his arm. Suddenly our hero felled this weirdo with a deft move, and the rest of the guys were surprised. They started attacking him, saying he is just a piece of meat for 400 crowns. Our hero began to deal with them, but they said that until they put him behind bars, will not rest. After a few seconds, the guys were surprised why they only give 400 crowns for our hero. But the guy replied that it was too early, and who gave them permission to lie on the ground. He then added that he in this hamlet dared to touch a man who should not be touched at all. At this point, Stitch started pouring some kind of potion on him, and the artifact said he had balls of steel. Sometime later at lunch, the man said that there are different rumors in the village. This morning, Derek was staggering around like a bum, and asked what the hell he'd said last night. Stitch replied that it was no big deal, just stretching out a bit. At that moment, Clyde burst in on them and said that not only had he fixed the weapon, but he had improved it as well. At the end, he made a wedge-shaped spur, and inside the piece he attached a wire he had brought from the dungeon. Our hero asked if it could really be called a sword. The man also added that it was different from those worn by swordsmen. As for the capsules for their use, Clyde only got 4 of them. The man also tabulated our hero with the ingredients and wrote an explanation. At the same time, he'll ask around for traders from other black markets, and said it won't be a problem. Our hero thanked the guys and said that the sword would be very useful to him. Suddenly Clyde stopped him and said since he had a good weapon, he should name it something. There's nothing else like it in the world, so they need to come up with something unique. At this point, the artifact prompted that this sword be named Penetrator. After a while, His Highness returned and the gate was opened. The events took place in the Kingdom of Venice in Castle Brendan. Alfred, who is the ruler's second son, entered the man's office and asked if there was any progress. The prince replied that it was good enough, and Alfred replied that he didn't think so. After all, an unauthorized departure from the Northern Front and the unauthorized departure of one company. Plus, in reflection, in a rank A dungeon without the king's permission. If my father finds out about this, he'll be in trouble. After that, the prince was asked about the artifact. When they get an audience with the king, let him say nothing. Alfred added that he'd make up an alibi for him, and there might be trouble if he rambled incoherently, so just let him give in. He also added for the prince to bring this bag with him when he goes to the audience hall. Plus, he doesn't need to forget the third price of the king and pass the servant, Gerald Masser. He came to have an audience with their majesty, and the latter said they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He had heard that the prince had been very busy the last 2 weeks, and said that was indeed the case. Alfred said that immediately after the herald heard the elf rebellion, he immediately rushed to quell the rebellion. The king's assistant said it was the first time even she had heard of such a thing. Besides, why would he want to suppress rebellions on the opposite side of the front? The herald replied that it was simply a matter of efficiency, and his servant had an artifact of prediction. They used it to locate the site of the rebellion, and relayed this information to the herald, who arrived at the castle for a regular report. Especially they rebelled for a reason. Their goal was to infiltrate a Ranka dungeon to take possession of artifacts. Had it not been for the herald's instant reaction, things would have turned out differently. The assistant asked if it was because of the artifacts that he broke the rules. Afterward, the king asked if they wanted to say that it was all for nothing. The herald replied that he did not, and the king asked what it was all about. The herald replied that he had lost an entire company, hovering over the inclusion of the Lieutenant of the East, but he had managed to destroy the artifact. The king was surprised, and the herald said that the artifact was contaminated, so he decided it was best to destroy it since it had been in enemy hands. And as proof of accomplishing this mission, the herald brought the head of their leader. The king wondered if it was definitely Ale and if he had returned safely. Let him return to you and rest. But on the way back, Alfred reminded him that there are some things that should not be forgotten. Now the herald owed him. Meanwhile, our hero sat by the river and fried himself a fish. The artifact said it looked like frog legs, but Stitch said you have to get a good look. Artifact said he had a feeling that the further they moved southwest, the fewer signs of human presence there were. He asked if it was because of the destination, and our hero replied that it was because of the elves. Not far from the southwestern part, which is where the last and largest settlement of elves is located. They can't stand people, so they try to keep outsiders out. The artifact said that you could use your abilities without fear and no one would notice. It's a great place to go through the dungeon. Stitch downed the bottle of water and said it was too early to get excited about the artifact. Some guy was running in the middle of the woods and said he had to do the legwork if he got caught. He was screwed. Suddenly he fell near the feet of some men and they said they would take him alive. Meanwhile, events were taking place in the southwestern forest kingdom in Venice, in what is known as the Dark Forest. Our hero walked and did not understand what was so mysterious in that dungeon that he could not reach it. He started touching trees and realized there was no data about this place. Even the search engine was dumb. You can't see the sky because of the thickets, and the map is useless, because you can't tell which side of the world it is. This forest is called the Dark Forest for a reason. Stitch wondered how it was possible for a wanderer to get lost, and suddenly he saw a man standing in front of him. Our hero approached him and started trying to bring him back to consciousness. After all, you can't just leave him like that. Suddenly the artifact shouted for Stitch to get out of here, and the guy asked why. But the artifact said if he wanted to splash around in the water with the wild spirits, he wouldn't get in the way. Stitch wondered if these corpses were going to save this guy. If he doesn't think of anything, they'll get him too. So our hero decided to use his artifact and activate an air blast. At this moment, he realized that since these monsters were made up of water, they couldn't afford an aerial attack. Then he touched the water itself and activated the lightning skill that strikes the target with a chain reaction. At the same moment, he activated Devouring Curses and was able to get rid of the opponents. Stitch realized that he had wandered into a deep thicket. They wouldn't even be able to find him here. Suddenly he realized that the man started to wake up and did not understand what this place was. After that, he thanked our hero for saving him. But the guy told him to calm down and tell me what happened to him first. Why he was tied up in there. The man wondered if our hero really didn't know. After all, there are creatures in the Dark Forest that can't just pass by people. Stitch wondered if they were elves and why the man had come to such a dangerous place. He replied that they were on their way to the capital to deliver goods, and decided to take a shortcut through the Dark Forest. Our hero began to realize that surely those very torn-off body parts were their companions. The man replied that he was just standing there watching the whole thing as the elves tied him up, and they were dragged away to the bloody pond. Then Stitch suggested that he would take him to the road that leads out of the forest. Then he would return to the village on his own. The man said with joy on his face that for something like this, he would be grateful to him for the rest of his life. Then our hero asked for a moment of time, and began to activate his animal instinct to find his way to the road. Our hero sensed something wrong as soon as he entered this forest, and the farther you go, the less often animal sounds are heard. So he realized that the exit was wherever their sounds came from louder, and after that he said to go ahead. Coming to the cliff, the guy told the man to follow this road and it would lead him out. The man said he could finally get out alive, and suddenly the artifact asked if our hero had noticed it too. At this point, our hero pulled out a gun, and the man was very frightened as to why he needed it. At this time, elves came out of nowhere and told our hero to give them the man. Our hero asked what would happen if he refused and fought. The girl replied that she wasn't going to say it twice and let our hero give it back. Stitch replied that he wasn't going to appear brave here. If they wanted to fight, then let them finish talking and attack. The artifact said if he wasn't here, many people wouldn't even resist. Afterward, the boy asked the girl if they really needed to have our hero now too, but she replied that talking seemed to work better than violence. The deputies were surprised, and the girl said that it wasn't like they were some kind of monsters that would just cause others years. So she told the aides to be quiet and began to address our hero. She asked if he knew the reason they were demanding the man be handed over. Stitch replied that he was totally clueless and asked for an explanation. The man took him by the shoulder and asked if he was going to listen to the ramblings of these elves for service. The girl said that before she began to explain, she wanted to hear what the man was telling him. After what our hero told the girl saw what nonsense the man had composed. Afterward, she called the boys with her and said she would show our neighborhood something interesting. After a while, they came some sacks, and our hero asked what they were. The elf girl replied that this was the wagon, if nothing confused our hero. It turned out to be a completely different direction here. If they were trying to take cover in the dark forest from an attack, the tracks would lead deep inside, but they point outward. The girl added that this is just the first one and something else happened here recently. Suddenly the girl started to go down to the pond, and our hero wanted to warn her about the danger. But the girl replied that it was their territory. She then reached for the hand of one of the man's partners, and said it was his so-called companion. All the men who have been in this forest have found the same label, and now let the men try to explain what it is. Our hero realized that the man had very awkwardly tried to trick him, so there is no excuse for him. It is after all the sign of the slave traders. The man started to say that there was nothing wrong with it, and our hero was a human being too. Why did he believe these pointy-eared men instead of standing up for him? At this time, Stitch punched the man and told him to shut his mouth. If he's so smart, he shouldn't have hidden the truth, and what's the point of doing something he himself is ashamed of? And how dare he say something about our hero not standing up for him? Then the girl asked how our land would do and what she would say now. At that time, the man broke free and started running deep into the forest. The girl said that she could manage on her own. She drew her bow and started shooting straight at the man's back, and our hero marveled at how easily she hit the moving target. Plus it hit a very sensitive spot and he started apologizing. He said if the girl would sit him up, he would promise never to get in their faces again and make amends. He asked for our hero to save him, saying that they were human after all, and he would do anything he asked. Then the elf girl presented a bow directly to his face, and the man further begged for mercy. The elf girl said it was unexpected. They are one time after all, and she thought our hero was trying to protect him. Stitch replied that he was sorry, but that he was one of those who could not contain his anger. So blocking her attack would be either a sham or foolish. The girl then asked if our hero really understood why she had to destroy everyone who complied with something. The boy replied that he understood, and he also knew that the people of Venice considered elves very dangerous. Except that our hero came here to calculate him and is not going to wait for a knife in the back. The girl really wondered what it was, and our hero didn't even move. She wondered if he was a mage, even though he didn't look like one. At that time, the guy started to activate the recovery skill. Stitch Girl's eye-catching artifact thinking, is this ring really a magical item? She almost doesn't feel into magic, so he certainly can't and let the helpers not intend to. Make it so he still drained all the mana with his magic item. At this time the enemies started attacking our hero, and he activated Crosswind. Stitch then asked if they were counting on this outcome anyway, why they were filling him in on the details. But the girl replied that they wanted to show that they don't destroy anyone without a reason. The artifact told Stitch not to waste magic power even if the limit increased. He had already used 125 out of a possible 150. The guy realized it wasn't hard to block her because she was aiming for her head all the time. Though defending yourself all the time was stupid too. The girl will lose at least an arm or a leg if our hero attacks. But the artifact says she won't even be left standing. So there's nothing to be done here, and the guy started activating the air blast with the artifact. At this time, the aides told Ms. Elena to be careful. She reflected that with an ordinary magic item, one couldn't use more than one type of magic. So the thought crossed her mind. Is this ring really an artifact? Stitch said it was and he got it himself. After that girl, I wonder if it's the damn dead guy. She realized it was very horrible and disgusting and started aiming her bow. Stitch asked what it was she was muttering, and he thought she said something bad about them. But the artifact replied that she was saying that such a face was not a sin to launch curses. Our hero wondered if she was talking about him, and suddenly an arrow flew into his chest. After falling into the chest, the artifact began to use recovery. The girl looked closely and wondered if he had such power. At this point, she decided not to think long and launched a second arrow right into his hand, and the guy wondered if she was looking down on him. He thought he could stand up to the elves, and the girl replied that he had a very useful skill. Even if he aimed and fired, our hero risked not hitting. But still he dares and activates the air blast. What was his surprise that his attack was able to be repelled, and even the artifact itself was surprised. Suddenly Stitch noticed that this girl had an arrow, and wondered if the single arrow had thwarted his attack. The artifact said that the skill blast of air is a concentrated magical force that forms a projectile if hit beforehand. Then you can destroy it. But he added that this is only theoretical. It is almost unrealistic to understand the situation, and hit a shot in 2 seconds by one movement. The artifact added that
This elven woman is not so simple, and our hero thinks so too.
He started attacking in close combat, and the girl saw what an unusual weapon he had. She didn't think he had anything else left. In another attack, the guy activated Crosswind, and the girl realized that our hero changed the trajectory with the wind. Then she decided she would blow his skull off when she got close. At that distance, she would ward off his skill, only he fired his ring. After that, she decided she would target the head and do it right now. But suddenly our hero's fist was near her face and he made a punch. He also added, no matter how maneuverable elves are, they are incapable of moving in the air, and there is nothing that can be done about it. Even overdeveloped feelings can become a problem, and the guy comes face to face with the girl. It was the first time since fencing lessons that the guy had faced such a strong opponent. The girl presented her gaze and asked what was the matter. She asked why he had come to this forest, or if he too was going to destroy his own kind. But the boy saw that he didn't come here for the elves, and he had no thoughts of fighting anyone. However, the girl will pay the price for wanting to do away with him, and let her now get ready. Our hero said that he still treated them kindly, and at first thought that he would not return alive from this battle. After that, he said that seemed to be enough, and what the girl was so surprised about. Just in case, he warned that he only needed a dungeon in this forest, and now he wouldn't lose his way with the help of the map. He said he'd keep her for a while if they ever met again. He'd bring her back. The girl wanted to stop him to say something, but I said he was on his way. But the elf girl further suggested he shout after her to come back. After a while, our hero realized what was the matter, and without a map, he had wound so many circles in this forest without thinking that the entrance would be under a tree. The artifact said it was strange to hear such a thing from someone who wanders and does it for a living. Stitch said, if it were a simple dungeon, a tree wouldn't grow in that spot because of magic. He realized that this was very unusual, and the artifact wrote what he wondered. Stitch replied that this was the first time he had ever seen a plant sprout right in a dungeon, and at this time began searching for a way in. But as it turns out, he has no experience exploring such dungeons. That's why his skill doesn't work. After that, he decided to activate his beast instinct and tried once more to find a path. The artifact wondered if our hero was looking for a path by the echoes of a sword strike, and its sort of visualization of sound. He added that our hero would definitely not starve to death, and asked when he started walking in the dungeons. Stitch replied that he's been doing it since he was 12 years old. If you want to do what you love, you have to be resourceful. He also added that they were already deep down. Something should have shown up by now, but somehow it was suspiciously quiet. Besides, they would definitely hear the monster's heartbeat if it was here. The artifact said that these people are very strange, and the problems are always in their language. They then saw something strange in front of them, and the artifact asked who was saying that excessiveness was also a problem. Stitch asked if that was a monster too, and the artifact said his name was Lego Roots. The guy realized that meant all the roots nearby perceived him as an enemy, and the artifact said it was better to touch them. There are only plants around and no hearts in them, so detecting the enemy is a hassle. However, our hero is one of the few who has hunted just such creatures and has noticed something. He noticed exactly that there are many of them, but the level is so-so. The artifact said it seems like this is not a good time to engage in idle chatter. Suddenly something started happening, and the artifact said it was telling our hero not to touch them. At this time, Stitch said these roots swallowed his arm and began sucking blood. The guy just wanted to know that with these reddish roots, monsters suck the blood out of living beings, and at the expense of it grows. Stitch started yelling that they were coming in closer and closer, and activated the crosswind. From that, even the artifact was surprised, and said that this skill wasn't meant for that at all. A little more, and they would have wilted the beef. Stitch asked someone he called a beef here, and added that he'd improve the moment he distinguished himself and punched once. After that, the guy put up his hand and decided to try something serious, and against a tree like that, he definitely can't stand. He activated the fireball and was very surprised that no matter who said what, the effect was awesome. After that, the artifact told our hero to absorb all the magical power. As soon as he did, the guy commanded the artifact to eat him. At that moment, something inexplicable happened. Our hero found himself outside the dungeon. Then the system said the guy gets 2 new skills, including the active-reactive skin skill. Now all decided that I needed to sort out my powers, and started going through them. He realized that he lacked magical power and decided to awaken the artifact. At that moment, the elf girl was behind him, and the guy asked what she needed. The girl replied that she didn't come to fight, and our hero thought she wanted to fight again and almost hit her. He then asked why she had come and if it was because of the map. He told her that he would return it when he had finished his business. But the elf girl replied that it wasn't because of the card, and he could take whatever he wanted, but only let him return one thing. Stitch was surprised and asked which one. Then the girl sat down on her knees and said she wanted the locket. Afterward, our hero got it and asked if she was really talking about it, and the girl wanted him back. At this time, her assistants chased after her and were glad that she was still alive. They had asked her not to go anywhere alone. Suddenly, the helpers noticed this medallion in the hands of our hero and wanted to take it away, but they failed. The artifact wondered what was going on again. The elf girl added that she was willing to do anything Stitch said in return. The guy asked what she was even thinking when she said that, and how she knew what he would order her to do. But the girl replied, "Since he put it that way, I doubt he could be called bad, especially since he let the man live after he found out he had done evil." Then our hero asked why
She wanted the locket, and if it really mattered to her that much.
if she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to say anything. If she wants him so badly, he'll get him back. Only our hero has one condition. After all, the girl promised to do anything. Then the guy said he was going to destroy every dungeon in this forest and have the girl help him when he got to the end. Let her help him avoid meeting the elves, and then he would return the medallion to her, and the elf girl agreed to these terms. After that, the elf girl told the aide that she would be gone for a few days. If the elder asked, she was off on a scouting trip. The forest was home for the girl from birth. Her grandmother, who raised her, told her many different stories, including people. According to her, people are greedy for other people's good, ready to commit any crime for their own benefit. In reality, among all the people who came here, there was not a single selfless person. But the girl noticed that our hero is the first who besides evil deeds showed his good sides. Our hero wondered what was going on, and somehow he found it hard to breathe. But the artifact said that the two warring races had united into one team. The girl said she didn't know if Stitch was good or bad, but she certainly wouldn't call him good. She asked why he was trying to conquer the dungeon. If it was all about items and artifact, then why did he choose the dungeon of this particular forest? Our hero replied that there were many others outside of Elven territory as well, and it was very long for him to explain. But maybe someone else he could tell it all to. After 4 days, they started to descend into some hole that was very deep. The entrance is hidden so that all sorts of passers-by don't poke around, and it's too deep and abyssal. Suddenly, during the descent down, the guy noticed, would this time the opponents be insects? He realized that insect opponents were easy to defeat. All you had to do was break their joints. Once he was fighting the insects, the girl asked if he was okay and let him be careful. A giant ant appeared in front of them, and the girl also started to go on the attack. She then noticed that at the same moment she was attacked by another ant, followed by a whole pack of them. Stitch began to defend her and used an artifact to activate a fireball. The girl was surprised at his ability and realized that his attacks when he fought her were just flowers. After that, the guy noticed some unusual smell, and the girl wondered how many skills could be used with one artifact. Stitch wondered what was the point of the ants dying like that, since they were just throwing themselves into the fire so it wouldn't spread to the stupid dungeon. He realized if monsters go for this, the dungeon is called Small Bing. It's mostly inhabited by insects, particularly ants. Most of them have solid armor, and it was all noticeable. After that, the guy activated Devouring Curses, and the girl asked if all artifacts had such properties. Stitch asked if it looked so strange that she couldn't take her eyes off it. But the elf girl replied that mage control is different from energy control, and it extracts a deeper essence. This artifact is a monster that can manifest magic, and it is also a dead man, so it can't harm a human being. The girl hesitated and said it was time for them to move on. At this point, Stitch decided to ask the artifact if it was even worth trusting, and realized he had no choice. They had already gone too far, and it was very confusing. The girl said that's why even the elves rushed to this dungeon, so our hero decided to clean it up a bit. At this time, he activated his beast instinct, and couldn't understand why there were so many monsters here. Stitch said he would try to determine by sounds, but this dungeon has a complex structure, and it's the first time he's encountered such a thing. Moreover, he hears that all the passages are full of ants, and feels too many stirrings. In addition, they prevent him from making a precise diagram. This is a difficult dungeon that no one has ever been able to complete. It is impossible to track down the Guardian using normal means. Our hero asked what they should do then, and the girl told him to hide. In a moment, she grabbed him by the neck and started dragging him somewhere. The girl added that he should not breathe and be very quiet. Suddenly, Stitch wondered if these monsters couldn't see them. but it turned out that there was active skill camouflage cloak. Artifact added that it seems they saw the ashes and came out to see if they should move their pupae. If there is a dungeon in this ant cave, it is the uterus that will be in the most guarded place, and those who are near her are the dungeon guardians. Isn't that natural? Stitch noticed that the artifact's head was brewing again, and asked if he was suggesting finding the location of the mate using ants. But the artifact replied, "If our hero understood it, then let him use it immediately after the ants appeared." The girl said the idea was good, but this dungeon didn't appear yesterday. Hardly anyone had ever tried to do this before. Then she added, "If these ways work, the alphas would have protected this cave long ago." The artifact said that the narrow passages leading to the guards were clogged with ants, so a dozen elves couldn't handle them. He also added that our hero should not worry, for he has thoughts on the matter and let him just act. At this time, our hero placed his palm and activated a fireball, followed by a camouflage weeping. After that, he asked the artifact if this was the way he had talked about. But the artifact replied that it was still far away, and that it was necessary to go forward. After that, the guys started attacking the monsters and moving forward. Our hero noticed that there were too many of them. Using Elena's skill to make a fuss and then looking for a calmer place is kind of a weird way to go about it. The artifact asked if our hero was dissatisfied with something, and at this time he activated the beast instinct. The guy replied that he seemed to sense something nearby and it was like someone's admiration. Stitch said that they had reached almost the very end, and there wasn't much left. But at that moment, Elena noticed something. In her hands was a bracelet that began to wear on her some damage. Most likely these things belonged to those who died in this dungeon, and then their bodies were eaten by the maggots. The artifact said if no one needs it, they can have it for themselves. After all, it might come in handy for curse auras. The boy wondered if such a strong skill required cursed items. But would an elf let a human take the elf's items? Stitch then asked if he could keep it since no one else wanted the bracelet. But Elena replied that they were cursed objects, and if he was unlucky, he could die. But our hero replied that he was guarded by an artifact, and need not worry. Elena doesn't know what he's up to, but if it's not going to cause trouble, let him act however he wants. The artifact told the guy that these things would be very useful to them, and let him take everything. Now, they had to move on. After walking some way, they saw a monster in front of them, and our hero said that it must be the Guardian. Seeing him, the girl started to draw her arrow and asked if they should speed up. All of a sudden, this big monster threw an ant egg near them, and our hero said that it really does look nasty. Elena shouted as another whole pack approached behind our hero. The ants have them surrounded on all sides, and we need to stop coddling and finish this uterus off. So Stitch activated the fireball. But in the moment, the guy wondered how they had time to grow up and were now guarding the queen. The artifact said it was very amazing, and does our hero know what they can do? Stitch chuckled and said that was the solution to all problems. Then he activated the aura of curses. Elena shouted that she would deal with the ones behind her, and let our hero charge forward. But the guy replied that he didn't need to and let her step aside. At that moment he activated a blast of air, and it was a great decision, because he handled the ant soldiers. Now it's time to extinguish all the other creeps. Stitch added that he would sacrifice them for the new ability. Cursed items, gear that lies abandoned in a dungeon for a long time is affected by cursed energy. As a result, cursed items harm their users and reduce their physical abilities. Therefore, no one but the researcher touched it. The power of our hero's artifact suppresses cursed items they can be safely carried around. However, the Curse Aura skill nullifies this suppression, which hangs a debuff on nearby opponents. Our hero said that this is truly a two-way stick, and let Elena stay out of the way and stand there. At this time, the guy picked up the bracelet and activated the Curse Aura. He asked how much she had already unleashed. Apparently he'd gotten it right. The artifact said right, and that's how the Curse Aura works. Now let the Alpha do the rest. Stitch turns to Helena to finish the queen, for he can't hold her much longer. The girl began to draw her bows, saying it was payment for them eating her brothers. Our hero then grabbed her and told her to cover her ears and stand still. At this time, the electric arc activated and the guy activated devouring curses. Elena said it was the first time she had ever seen a man as reckless, yet strange as our hero. The lad replied that he could say nothing in his own defense, and had already come close to the heart of the queen. The artifact's magic power limit increased, and the curse devouring skill level increase took place. Our hero counted and realized that the second dungeon is already protected, and we need to make an escape. 3 days later, the boys were walking through the forest, and the girl said that it was the oldest dungeon and the most brutal in this forest. Afterward, Stitch said he was much stronger than he was at Small Bing, but Elena replied to make him listen to the end, and she meant that the danger was the elves. The Redwood Dungeon is not far from where the elves live, and it will be hard to sneak past them without being noticed. And now our hero must listen to the girl and do as she says. She then showed the old trail and asked if he knew who had left it. She added that it is a trail of peculiar striders, and there are elf scouts in the dark forest, among which only the most elite can get a special position. Due to their medical skill, they are unrivaled in pursuit. Our hero apologized and said he had never even heard that word before if they were so prominent. Surely people should know about them. But the elf girl added that these guys don't leave alive those who learned of their existence. Elena said if they attacked in the open, you could still win, but if they attack from the back, you lose before you realize where they attacked from. After a while on the road, the girl said it was very strange to her that she couldn't hear animal sounds. Our hero asked what was so strange about it, and the beasts in the dark forest are themselves quiet. At this time, the guy decided to activate animal instinct, and was sure he couldn't sense anything around him. The girl assumed someone was after them and she would try to locate them. After that, she activated the hostility detection skill to find out a few things. Suddenly she wondered if it wasn't hostility, but intentions to destroy. She shouted that danger was near and suddenly someone attacked the boys. At this time, the other elves came out of the bushes and said that they hadn't seen Elena in a long time. The girl shouted, asking what they were up to, and was very frightened. Chester asked if she was in a position to ask questions now, and the other elf told her to relax. They then asked how dare she bring a man onto someone else's property. She then added that she was fearless, and began to draw her bow. Afterward, Chester asked if she didn't realize what she was doing right now, and Elena tried to explain. She said this man just needed to walk to the redwood tree and there are things they need to do together. Meanwhile, the second elf wondered if the girl had been robbed of her relic and threatened. I guess this guy's not easy. But suddenly this elf said that Elena was once a strider too. Chester added that they will hear her excuses about the relic at the meeting. On the way back, the elf told Elena to rejoice, for after all this time she was finally back. After that, he asked what kind of person he was and he lost a lot of blood but he still didn't die. But Elena replied, if he knew how valuable he was, he wouldn't treat him that way. But the boy replied that it was some nonsense and let the girl try to talk like that in front of the elder. Then she would not feel bad. Afterward they met the elder, and she said they had done a glorious job. She added that it had been a long time since they had seen each other and welcomed Helena, the keeper of the relic. She then turned her attention to our hero and asked what kind of man Chester had brought. The boy replied that it wasn't enough for him to steal the relics from Elena, but he dared to threaten her. So they caught him near the village. Afterward, the elder asked if he was still dead and the boys didn't know it themselves, for the torn flesh had tightened. Stitch had lost a lot of blood, and a normal person would have died of shock long ago, but his heart was still beating. The elder told them to stop the bleeding and they would discuss the punishment for this guy later. And to Elena, she ordered her to follow her and the girl obeyed. The elder said that the Redwood Dungeon had reached a level where it was difficult to hold, and they were already at their limit. It has grown so large that the spirit is about to go beyond the borders of the dungeon, and several villagers were kidnapped a few days ago. This dungeon seeks to expand its territories, and people have no time to protect the village. But the elder added that despite such a difficult situation, Elena not only allowed the man to take the relics, but also became his employee. The elder added that she, along with others, are not going to turn a blind eye to what happened and let the matter go unpunished. Meanwhile, our hero was in some room and the artifact told him to wake up. As soon as our hero woke up, he did not understand where he was and heard someone wanted to destroy him. The artifact added that it could heal him but could not awaken him and would explain something to him now. Our hero was hit by an arrow of elves and he was about to go to the other world, but the artifact managed to save him. For 3 days, he fell unconscious. And now he has entered a place that serves as both a courtroom and a public place of execution, where he is on trial. The elder said that after the guy went into the dark forest, he stole the relic from Elena. Our hero wondered if it was true and asked what had become of Elena. He thought that it seemed like she was being treated the same way he was. Maybe it was because she was an elf too. If this was the situation, it wouldn't seem that way to him. Stitch wondered what that locket was and said it was indeed. Afterward, he found out that it wasn't just important to Helena herself and was very surprised. The elder then said that he used the relic as an excuse and threatened Helena as well to get her to lead him through the dark forest. Stitch replied that this was also true, and the elder asked what was the purpose of his entering the dark forest and doing so. Our hero replied that he had come to trash all the dungeons that are in the forest. The elder then told him to inform her of the number of troops that had participated in the search for the dungeon artifacts and their current locations. Also have him tell the expedition's supply plan and what their force level is. The artifact along with our hero wondered in a moment where it all came from and said he was on his own. The elder thought he was joking with her, and how he was even going to single-handedly smash the dungeon. At this time, Chester came down and said that you have to lie too, depending on the situation. He also added that elves certainly don't do that and punched our hero. After all, you have to behave with people according to their rules, and only in this way you can get the truth. The elder then said that they would now proceed to interrogate Elena, and would also listen to her side of the story. For starters, have her tell us why she didn't go to them for help when the relic was taken from her. Why on earth was she following this man unquestioningly? But the girl replied that she had decided that the goal of destroying all the dungeons would help the elves. She doesn't know if he was bluffing or not, but the fact that he managed to defeat 2 dungeons is true. The elder added that one must have at least military-level training to destroy a dungeon. If she is telling the truth, then surely she must have followed him everywhere, and that means she can tell about his troops and supplies. Elena replied that he had none of that, and it was all done by the 2 of them. The elder couldn't understand what had happened to Elena and why she was covering for this man. But the girl replied that there was no point in her covering for him, she was just telling it like it is. Afterward, the entire audience turned their attention to our hero and marveled that he was still alive. He stood up and asked if they really wanted him to show the human way. Stitch suggested that maybe he could then try fighting non-stop for 2 days and see who would break faster, him or Chester. The girl added that the elder said that was the limit and he was their way of solving the problem. Elena said that she brought someone who can defeat the monster and dungeon fighting spirit. The artifact asked our hero if he was missing too many hits and could have used a blast of air, ending the fight with less magic. But the guy responded by saying if he makes a mess, it will cause problems for everyone. The elder asked Elena if she even knew what she was talking about. After all, she was now saying things that were against the laws of this world. But afterward, the assistant said, "Quicker, she let that monster out. If Elena is telling the truth, then let them test her word right there," and Elena agreed to it. After that, they decided to give him a new challenge, and the guy agreed to it. Suddenly, an armored bear entered the arena, and the guy had heard that someone had managed to tame it. The aide said it wasn't too much. If Elena was telling the truth, it probably wouldn't be enough. After that, the elder shouted for our hero to demonstrate his abilities. Stitch realized that they wanted to make him fight, but to let such a monster out and not give him any weapons is too much. He then turned to his artifact. How could it talk if it wasn't on hand and had the alphas taken it? But the artifact replied that he hid himself to keep others out of sight and offered to strategize. But Stitch replied that it seems the best method of fighting an armored bear is to run away, for that's what he's been taught. But he still decided to taste it and activated the fireball. At that moment he realized that his attack had been in vain, and the bear was worth its name.
And he decided to apply a blast of air and asked how he could do such a thing.
Suddenly the audience was surprised and everyone didn't understand what our hero shot with. When he looked closely, he was shocked to see that the bear had withstood it. He then jumped the air and began to activate an electric arc on the bear. The aides wondered if he had been given magical items, even though they had taken away everything he had on him. The artifact said that he had spent almost all of it on healing, and the magic power was already running low. If it continued like this, it would end badly. Our hero replied that he knew, but it seems lightning works on the bear. If so, he could destroy it and began to go on the attack. At this time, our hero activated a fireball and aimed it directly at the enemy. Now he decided to see how healthy he was on the inside and activated the electric arc. The guys were surprised and said that such a thing is impossible and our hero is just a monster. One of them said that he had violated all the laws of the natural world. Elder asked, "Do they have a choice if they miss this chance again? There may not be a second try." So she apologized to Helena, because she didn't believe her before. The girl then asked if the elder intended to do something about it. The elder replied that the only thing left to do was to trust our hero, and then she asked what his name was.
She added that he risked his life to honor their request and prove that he had the ability.
Therefore, the girl had a question as to why our hero took the relic from Elena. Stitch replied that at first he didn't even know it was a relic. Naturally, he had no thoughts of appropriating it for himself. The elder replied, if he really didn't have bad intentions, then they have no reason to interfere with our hero. However, they could help with basic equipment. The artifact suggested that it seems they clearly don't like our hero. At this point, Elena said she would go along with our hero and the elder forbade it, even though Elena said that Stitch's goal might have gone in their favor. But she would have to suffer the punishment and pay for her shipka. The artifact said that in other words they could not send their precious elf into a dangerous dungeon. Our hero shouted that the artifact gets stronger with each dungeon sweep and don't let the girl worry. After that, the elder told the Chester to give all the items to our hero and asked if he would need anything else. Stitch pondered a bit and said he wouldn't mind a couple vials of potions. Meanwhile, some elves attacked the monster saying that it can't be allowed to go outside the fence. They were yelling where the reinforcements from Genri At that time, someone activated a fireball, and as it turned out, it was our hero. The elves wondered if the man himself had come to their aid, and what he was doing in this dark forest. But our hero's elf helpers said that if he was touched, he would personally cut off his legs. One of the elves wondered if the strikers were now guarding humans, and what the magic was. The aide replied that he didn't know either. But according to the elder, this boy is their last hope. Meanwhile, the elder told Elena that she wasn't crazy to send her to such a dangerous dungeon. She also added that her sister-in-law, who was difficult for her to give, died because of the monsters, and her son disappeared into the redwoods, and now she is left with one granddaughter. If the monsters wipe out those who are on guard 24/7 in front of the dungeon entrance, their area will become a solid dungeon. Elena asked, since they wanted to make the most of our hero, wasn't it better to send reinforcements there? But the elder retorted by asking if she really thought she could serve as a backup. She also added that you can't deceive yourself. Even if she goes to the redwood tree right now, her father won't come back. They should always be prepared for the worst. This applies to the current situation. No matter what unique abilities a person possesses, if they fail, they will all be in danger. Therefore, a contingency plan must be prepared. Elena wondered if it would have to be done this time too, and the elder replied that this time she would go in person. She may not have the same skills as Cain, but at least she won't bring calm to the elf world for long. The artifact told our hero that right now something very strong could be felt near the entrance. Stitch asked if the artifact knew anything about plants in dungeons, but there were none in his memory. Perhaps these are unique plants that only grow in redwoods, and have Stitch keep his hands off of them, and find a way to get through this place. The artifact added, if any strange things start happening here and our hero collapses unconscious, they will never get out of this dungeon again. Our hero fully agrees with this, and added that he himself has no desire to stay here for a long time. The artifact asked if they had already made it, for he thought they would have to traverse the 9 circles of hell. Our hero said that after going through the plant dungeon, the usage conditions changed, and they came to the right place. And if the roots have grown that deep, it means there's water underground. And if there are underground springs in such a godforsaken place, something might come up. At this time, Stitch pierced the ground with his sword and activated the funnel. Suddenly our hero turned around and realized that somewhere he had already seen such plants. When he smelled the bad odor, he wondered if all the moisture had been sucked out of them. The artifact added that he couldn't sense the presence of life. Stitch said that judging by the smell of whatever is in those bags. He then began to wrestle with the plant, and asked if it would not allow him to suck up the nutrients. After a while he said for someone to wake up. Once one of the elves came to his senses, our hero asked if he knew what the place was. Someone with a look of consternation on their face said that it was a mahogany dungeon, and they were all going to die. But our hero slapped him in the face, telling him to pull himself together, and not to be so afraid. He then handed him an escape scroll and told him that when the others woke up, have him use it to get out of here. Since our hero has a lot of things to do, he said he would go from here. But at that moment the elf stopped him, and said that it was necessary to save him. Stitch didn't know what he was talking about, since our hero had already taken everyone out. The elf added that there was another who was the reason they were still alive, and he should definitely get out of here with them. Meanwhile, that guy thought those insufferable things were wasting a lot of magic, but still trying to suck it all the way out. The guy was already at his limit and had nothing else left. At this point, our hero along with the elf came to his aid, and the elf was very surprised at what was happening. Our hero also added that it must be very painful and told the elf to get off him for now. Stitch started running to help, saying it would hurt even more, and let him clench his teeth tighter. The elf, looking at all this, told our hero to be more polite to him, and not to act like a rude person. But Stitch replied that he didn't need to be taught politeness, and would rather let the elf take a friend and get out of here. In addition, our hero added that we should hurry, because those who were unconscious, most likely already awake. The elf started to run off to help the others and thanked our hero for the scroll. Our hero asked the artifact if the guy he saved was really the same drainer, and it turned out to be true. Stitch added that maybe no one would attack the elf until he got to the rest of the survivors. He felt that the dungeon master was behind the wall, and he kept his eyes on our hero and drooled. At this time, the guy activated a blast of air and realized that there were shades of red everywhere, and that's why it was called that. It doesn't just smell like blood, it actually feeds on blood and grows off of it. This is the first time our hero has seen such a hideous plant, and wondered if there was any information about this keeper. The artifact replied that it was a subspecies of the world tree, similar to the huge tree that grows over a dungeon like this one. It's so steeped in magic that it's already hard to guess what it was originally, and the artifact added that it looks very disgusting. That's when our hero realized his name was an abomination and activated an air blast. He figured he was defending himself with stalks, and that means he has intelligence. Therefore, he activated the fireball to make this plant wither away. but suddenly he saw a wall of blood in front of him and was very surprised. He wondered if it was too much, since none of the attacks worked on him. At that time, the artifact asked if our hero had noticed anything else suspicious. When he tries to confront the monster that has been living in this forest for several hundred years, he just can't handle it. Plus, let him remember Cain. Anosov wanted such a capable mage and sucked the magical powers out of him. Our hero said that it seems that because the tree absorbs so much magic, its tentacle is incredibly powerful. Stitch realized that even with his passive skills he wasn't getting anywhere and noticed the danger. So far, our hero had only fought plants, but he had never yet been able to absorb normal magic power. So he would have to save his strength for recovery, and he began to sip potions. He realized the sly bastard was standing in front of him and noticed the plant was smiling. If it's a dungeon keeper, it would go through the guardian first and crawl out. Since there are no other monsters here besides plants, I would save my victims to devour them later. So our hero wondered if he had consciousness and feelings. So he realized how disgusting it was. Stitch started to lash out and asked if some lousy monster would dare mock a human. He got angry and told him to come out again. If he could tease him, he'd take him down no matter what. At this time, Stitch activated Crosswind and Conditioned Reflex. He noticed that the plant didn't seem to be able to control its emotions, and there might be a great chance to get a good position in that narrow gap. Then he realized that the plant would have to beat off its own stems to get to him, and that wasn't too pleasant. Stitch began to remember that he had wanted to try something back in the battle with the armored bear, but there had been too many people then, and he hadn't risked it. So he decided that this was the moment he would decide to do the deed. He activated the air blast along with the fireball and made an incredible combination. He himself was getting hot for it, and the artifact said while there was a chance, we should blow the hell out of this place. So he told our hero to attack and never stop. While Stitch was running, he activated an electric arc, and using it to disarm the enemy completely. Our hero added that it was enough for him to just briefly prosthetize his opponent, and the artifact realized he was up to something. As it turned out, the enemy's entire body was rough and wrapped in thick stalks except for one not obvious place. He swung his arm and hit right into the plant's mouth, telling that wooden thing to disappear. At this point, Stitch began to activate the curse aura, and the artifact added that it wouldn't be enough. He asked if the guy could hold out, and the guy said he would try. Our hero has realized that he doesn't have enough strength, but he can't allow himself to be laughed at a second time. So he activated debuff curses, which absorbs all the energy of cursed items and enhances skills. Along with that, he got a crazy effect, and the Elder meanwhile wondered what was going on in the dungeon. The deputies reported that they couldn't figure it out, and our hero went in there alone, not coming out of there for a long time. The Elder said that this was the limit of Mahogany. This time she would have to go inside and suppress the dungeon. The deputy was surprised and said that's really crazy. But at that moment something started to happen, and the guy yelled for everyone to put their arrows away. Suddenly he realized that these people appeared to be the ones who had disappeared earlier. The Elder has ordered that they be taken to safety, and it seems Drainer is still alive. Helena started running towards her father's body and was very excited. The Elder looked at all of this, and realized that our hero was indeed able to save their family members. The girl was very glad that now her mom and dad were alive. But one of the elves said he was overstepping his bounds and asked that troops be sent to the dungeon. After all, some man had single-handedly saved their Mr. Drainer and given them the scroll. Well, no matter how strong he is, it's impossible for a man to get out of a redwood tree, so you have to help him. Suddenly something started to happen to the dungeon and it began to break free. The Elder shouted for urgent help for our hero and to take action. So one of the assistants shouted that they were all going into the dungeon together right now. Meanwhile, our hero wondered why his left leg still hadn't recovered.
The artifact also wondered what kind of condition one must be in to take so long to recover.
As soon as Stitch came outside, everyone started cheering, saying he was their savior, and they were now free. Meanwhile, in the prince's kingdom, it was being talked about that the northern border had been unattended for too long. The herald said for Balstock to stay and sort this out. Can't he remember what he was talking about? After that, the prince held out the letter to him, and added that his scout in the potions realm had accidentally discovered a new dungeon, and reported it. So the herald told the lad to drop the best warriors from his guard, and go after the artifacts as soon as possible. But he also added that this dungeon is essentially on the ground, and one has to be careful not to breed an international scandal. The herald said he would go to the northern borders, and as soon as Balstock was done, have him return at once. Meanwhile, our hero said that he doesn't support racial discrimination, but he's still going to the human village. So he asked Helena if it was really possible to talk freely like that, and she said not to let our hero worry. He wondered if this was some kind of special elf magic, though it wasn't surprising. They could even sense dungeons. One of the guys added that among the elves there are some like their kind that are sensitive to magic, so they can see magical flows. But there are cases that make your head spin. When the power in the atmosphere is concentrated in a single point. It was at this point that the dungeon was budding, and our hero realized that it seems a new dungeon was now being created somewhere nearby. The artifact said that it would be very good if no one interfered. But our hero replied that it wouldn't last long, and it was necessary to capture the dungeon faster. At this time, Elena came out to his room and asked him when he was going to leave and wanted to go with him. Stitch wanted to refuse, but the artifact said her abilities could very well come in handy. She was a striker after all, so she has no equal in combat because of her agile movements and powerful archery attacks. Plus the dungeon exploration ability also plays a good role. After a while they were on the road, and the guy said a small village would appear soon. They needed to rest, and then they had another week's journey. Watching the village from the cliff, Stitch said that even though it looked human, any odd behavior might make them suspicious. But the artifact reminded the guy to think about himself, because he was the one who was wanted. But his clothes were different now. Looking at the wanted ad for our hero, the artifact said that the human ability to copy appearances is very impressive. Before entering the village, our hero said his name was Brian Gosling, and the woman with him was named Grace. The guard then gave them a plaque and told them not to lose it and to have a good rest. Stitch said the girl did pretty well and why she decided to ask the question. She wondered why on earth they had to hide their names, and the guy got really scared. The artifact asked if our hero had just now realized that he hadn't told the girl he was wanted. Then the guy decided to suggest we go somewhere first and talk it over there. Already being in some place, Stitch noticed that it was a bit noisy here compared to the forest. So the girl will have to get used to it, because it will go on day after day. At this point, the girl decided to try the alcoholic beverage and said that, and did not like it at all. The artifact again reminded our hero that their tastes are not at all understandable, and then Stitch decided to talk. After telling the story, Elena realized that our hero is wanted for revenge. But Stitch replied that it was a personal vendetta. If the girl wanted to come back, she could do so at any time. Elena added that she understood where this revenge came from, and that's what those words meant during their first meeting. Since our hero saved an entire elven nation, Elena decided to repay him for his help. The girl added that her father and grandmother approved this decision, and our hero can't refuse her. Elena said it's not an easy case, because it involves the king himself, but even a man like our hero could handle it. Then the girl wanted to examine the ring on our hero's hand, but the latter answered to keep her quiet. Behind them, two guys were talking about troops being stationed inland. Too many people had been hurt, that's why they'd put them there. The guys thought that there was definitely a person involved, since only personal belongings were missing. How elusive you have to be caught for so long. Elena said that things have gotten complicated, and there are troops on all the roads, and unknown persons are tooling around in the forest. So she asked what our hero would do while he sipped his beer. Meanwhile, the kingdom has gathered everyone who wants to go to the feeder. The general said there was a disturbance on the road to the feedlot where the merchants drive. The general added that they plan to position troops there, but it will take time. Therefore, those who don't have companions should team up with others and move around together. Our hero realized that this is right, and they won't just give up. So we need to find someone who's right for them.
Some man said he was going to follow this road and then turn toward the Zeldia kingdom.
Our hero replied that they needed to go that way too and offered to go together. The man replied that he had already found his own company, and let the boys ask the man. His name is Farquaad Filch, and he's a rather famous merchant who had luxury coming out of every crevice. The latter was surprised, and said that he would only take this man as a traveling companion. Filch then asked if it was an adventurer, and then surely he could protect at least himself. So he told our hero not to give him any trouble on the road, and the second man invited our hero into his wagon. Already on the road, he decided to ask Stitch what exactly he was doing. The guy replied that he's a dungeon explorer. He goes into the dungeon and gets trophies. The man also wanted to be an explorer as a child, but goblins shot him in the knee when he was a kid, so he couldn't. Meanwhile, our hero tells Elena that she's the first one of them to sense danger. Even though it's the first day, let the girl look around. She listened to him and said she would take it over. It was already evening, and they were roasting meat on the fire and thought that so far all was quiet in the neighborhood. Suddenly someone fell out of the water near them and our hero got a little scared. The girl wondered if the particles of magic had already had time to spread, and so they would fall under their influence. Elena began to look around and wondered if these were the same strange creatures. And the guys were wondering where so many soldiers came from, and suddenly one of them noticed one thing. Namely, a trinket in the hands of an uncle, and surely it could be sold for a lot. Afterward, one of the assistants asked the boss if it was really necessary to search everyone. But he said that the pig was their target, that's all. And the others should be cleaned out a little, so as not to look suspicious. The other man said he always says this. Military equipment is taken away anyway, even if it's going to be heavy. They can't just leave it here. The boy then said that it seems they have a problem and why is our hero moving there. At this point they decided to put him down and started attacking him together. Stitch was surprised that it wasn't enough for them to use Maggie for looting. They were also attacking in droves. Our hero one by one interrupted everyone and asked if they didn't want to fight him anymore. The aides wondered what was the matter, if the magic was no longer active. At this point, our hero noticed that after the mahogany, information about new skills and abilities began to appear in his head. The artifact added that it was not a hidden function, but simply their bond had become stronger. But our hero's mood only soured at these words. At this time, the enemy told the boss to do something to our hero, because he could not imagine that such a thing could happen. But the one said that there are no abnormalities in his magical skills, and our hero is some kind of special. Then the guy decided to ask who our hero was. After all, they only planned to search the little man and get out of here. Stitch then said that there were robbers standing right in front of him, and would they really just stand there and watch if they were him as well? The man thought about it and said that was right too, and suggested we quietly part ways. Suddenly that man's aide used magic to teleport him directly to our hero, and he took a shot. Stitch realized that the jerk had suddenly disappeared, and then suddenly reappeared. Then he decided to question where the bastard himself was from, and a punch flew into his face. Then the man marveled that our hero was not only able to withstand magic, but also to endure the attacks. Going back, the man said there was something else to pick up, and the deputy asked if he still wanted to pick up something. Then he was gaining head from the suggestion that they take our hero with them. Meanwhile, Elena watched where they went and thought they ate in a second. Is it really unusual brigands and why they took our hero? Then the girl decided that she has only to follow them. Meanwhile, the artifact asked our hero if he had been passing out too often lately. Stitch then asked what he was supposed to do if his opponent just took off and disappeared. Especially they used magic, and there was nothing to be done about it. He also added that it would have been better if the artifact hadn't nagged, intervened during the battle and helped him. Our hero sat outside and wondered if this was really their lair. If it is, they've got a good thing going. At this point, the same man approached him and said his name was Gareth, and asked that our hero join them. He also added that he is a patriot who truly loves this kingdom, because he is a noble outlaw who helps people. Our hero wondered if he was a patriot of a country that looks like dog shit and said his name was Brian. Stitch added that he wasn't crazy to join a gang of robbers. But Garrett repeated again that they were noble brigands, and moreover, they didn't rob every merchant. The guys realized that their offer didn't exactly inspire our hero, but Gareth said his instincts were right. Garrett then reminded him that his aide had once been a live-in bum himself, and was now a member of their precious intelligence. Plus, the second partner was later able to learn magic on his own. Gareth slapped his hand on the table and said it was all thanks to him. That's why he has a nose for real diamonds. Suddenly, one of the assistants yelled out that they were under attack, and the boss asked who was doing security. The guys looked around and realized that arrows were flying from unknown places. Our hero realized it was a great moment, and the boss ordered everyone to check on the wounded. Gareth then turned his attention to our hero, and asked if he still had a partner. But Stitch started to run away, and at that time, Elena, who was sitting in a tree, called him to her. Our hero said that there must be a bunch of brigands in the neighborhood, and did Helena interrupt everyone? But she dismounted in moderation, so as not to cause panic. She added that she had to tie up their aides to prevent them for a while. Meanwhile, the boss was trying to catch up with them, and realized they were very fast. Our hero turned around and said that he must be far behind them. Elena also added that they had come here by the shortest route, but Garrett replied, though he couldn't be persuaded now, he wouldn't let him leave like this. Doesn't he know what's going to happen next? Stitch listened to him and said he was very annoying and let Gareth know the measure. At this time he began to attack our hero, and Elena pulled out her bow. Our hero was able to dodge the blow, and the artifact added for Stitch to be careful and aim for the stomach. Just as he wanted to activate the conditioned reflex, he noticed that the enemy had returned. Gareth squinted his eyes and realized that it seemed our hero was seeing something. The artifact clued our hero into the fact that his opponent also has an artifact that allows him to move freely between the spiritual and material worlds. Therefore, to our hero, he looks like a ghost. But Stitch did not understand what the spiritual and material world was. The artifact replied that it was hard for the human eye to catch, so he told Stitch to act as he would at that moment. At this time, the artifact told our hero to dodge to the right, for he cannot see his opponent. Then our hero took a punch and Gareth started screaming in pain. Without letting his guard down, Stitch shouted for Elena to let her arrows fly. Meanwhile, Gareth's assistants didn't realize how our hero notices the boss's movement and blocks them. They wondered if he had a way to make it all go away. In addition, it feels as if our hero is keeping up with the boss in skills. So no matter how strong he was, the guy decided he needed to help him. But at that moment a rock flew into his face, and Elena said she couldn't stay away from such a mess. The enemy's aides then decided that they would also help and attack Elena together. The girl activated a wind gust skill that knocks down opponents. The guys were surprised. Did she also have magical skills? At this time, the same man Filch appeared, and realized that it was the same gang of forest robbers that had attacked them. He shouted for his army to blast everyone here. The guys began to attack our hero, and he wanted to explain that he was their traveling companion. But they further acted on the man's orders. Stitch realized it was very dark in here, and the man had misunderstood him. But now if he escapes, he'll be wanted and possibly even hunted down. So there is only one thing left for him to do, and that is to launch a counterattack. Meanwhile, the assistant asked the boss what happened, and if they were okay. They didn't realize anything themselves, but they were attacked by the guys they had robbed in the afternoon and brought backup with them. Plus, the boss noticed that this guy was neutral to physical attacks. They tried everything but magic. The assistant then said that he would try to suppress it somehow, and activated the drag skill. At this point, they saw that it had an anti-shock coating. The boss wondered who they thought they were since they came with such high-end equipment. The good thing was that only one had the coated gear and the boss would have to step in. He told his assistant to stand here and support the others with magic. At this time, he sat on that guy's neck and started swinging his weapon. He realized that the protection on his face prevented him from making a hit, and decided to try again. But at that moment, he was pushed away by the opponent's assistant, and the boss fell to the ground. At that moment, our hero shouted for him to lower his head and activate the fireball. The boss was very surprised and couldn't understand what was the matter and what kind of magic it was. The man who attacked the boss started yelling about how hot he was. The artifact was angry that how could anyone think that some helper would save from his skills. At this time, our hero noticed that the man began to swing his sword and realized that it looked a bit heavy for an ordinary man. At the moment of impact, our hero simply stepped aside, and the man was unable to hit him. Stitch said it wasn't the first time he'd encountered such thugs, and now he understood his problems. He added that all it takes is a kick in the joint to get them to roll off their feet. At the same moment, Elena decided to help, and decided to finish off this opponent. Our hero told the boss that he was mistaken for one of them. That's why you can't even escape in peace. He also said he was sick of these royals. With their help, he could at least teach them a lesson. Suddenly, he activated an electric arc, and everyone was surprised with his abilities. Filch was surprised that our hero had been at one with the brigands all this time, but our hero approached him and asked him who started all this. Besides, the boss was wondering how he knew where they were. I mean, they were covering their tracks. Suddenly it occurred to the guy that there are still people who use tracking tags. So the deputy said they should have just left them alone to take what they needed. The boss swept up our hero saying he was sick of it. Does he also depend on the royal family? But Stitch replied that he was wrong and asked what their goal was. Was it to overthrow the king? The boss said that the royal family of Venice has long been rotten, for they amass untold wealth for themselves by oppressing neighboring states. So the boss asked if it was safe to watch the country go downhill. And this man is one of those who materially support the Northern Front, and in return are exempted from paying taxes on Venice territory. Our hero reflected that although their goals overlap, it would take much longer. Then he decided to ask the boss if he could go, or if he was going to keep him here any longer. The fellow replied that he could let our hero go, for those who are against the kingdom are his allies. Then the boss decided to tell the assistants that they had come here for nothing, and let them go elsewhere. Afterward, the boys shook hands, and our hero hoped they would never meet again. After a while, the boys were on their way, and the girl noticed that they were taking too long to walk. Suddenly they saw what they needed, and our hero said that it was much more convenient with the dungeon finding skill. The guy took a closer look, and realized that this cave looked pristine, and suggested we go inside right away. While inside, the girl noticed a monster, but our hero said it was a goblin. Stitch said he was certainly suited for a newfound dungeon, and asked if Elena had ever fought a goblin. The girl replied that whole packs of goblins sometimes came into the forest, and she of course fought. The boy didn't know about the ones she'd met in the forest, but the ones in the dungeons had to be careful. He added that they are creepy dirtbags and set traps everywhere that could prove deadly. Stitch started removing these traps, saying that goblins are good at this sort of thing, but if they fall into their traps, they will immediately attack. As soon as our hero said that, the goblins started attacking and the guy activated a fireball. He also told the girl to remember that land goblins are very dangerous, but now they were saved by his magic. Meanwhile, a girl said that there aren't many monsters in the newly created dungeon, and the guardian's level is quite low. The helpers said the timing was right, but no one in their squad knew how to use the pathfinding skill. The second assistant added that it is not easy to find craftsmen who possess such skills, and they don't need a simple guide in this task. Lilia told her partners to wait here, for she had noticed something amiss. She noticed that the stretch was torn. Could it be that some monster with intelligence had torn it? But she also noticed that they tore it up, and here it's neatly cut. The aide added that it seemed suspicious to him too, as no monsters had been caught along the way so far. Then the second assistant added that there really seems to be something here. The boys noticed the Gorlin corpses, and the helper suggested that a troll had come here. But the girl added that the corpses were burned. In a new dungeon, it's unlikely that a monster with this skill would have appeared from the start, which means there's someone here. The girl said to hurry up so that this someone wouldn't get to their target early. Meanwhile, our hero and Elena have come to the right place, and it seems to be the dungeon keeper. In front of them was a monster called the Sea Devil. If one didn't hit all 9 eyes, one couldn't easily defeat it. At that moment, our hero activated the electric arc and began his attack. Meanwhile, the other guys realized that it looked like the dungeon keeper had already been activated. The girl didn't know who it was, and thought that with such skills, goblins weren't a problem at all. But it is they who must master the artifact. So the girl told the deputy to get ready to shoot. She added that he would shoot once in the back of our hero's head, and after that, they would finish off the guardian with their own hands. The guy started to draw his bow, and not knowing who our hero was, wished him a happy journey. What was his surprise that Stitch was able to dodge, and how did that happen? The boys were attacked by someone and they both fell to the ground. Afterwards, the boy asked if his partner was okay. Our hero asked who they were, and added that he would not fall for their excuses. The artifact said that the arrow was clearly meant to destroy him. The guy was surprised that our hero just used magic, and it turns out all these goblins are his handiwork. Stitch began to point his hand with an electric arc, and asked if they were going to respond. The guys started fighting back with their shields, and the artifact said it was a magical item. The artifact added that it is a form of storage account that absorbs and sends out magical energy. Our hero's attack has exceeded the limits of absorption, and is now working as it should. Meanwhile, Elena continued to fight the monster and shoot it with her bow. She then asked our hero who these people were, and Stitch replied that they were clearly not their allies. Then the girl offered to deal with them first, and she would help him. Our hero replied that would be fine and told the girl to shoot at that point. But their opponent Lily said they would take out our guys individually. At this point, our hero was grabbed by a rope and he didn't realize what the hell this was about. Suddenly, one of Lilia's aides hit our hero with a shield and said that this time he was definitely finished. But Stitch didn't think long before he decided to activate the crosswind and was able to escape the trap. The enemy wondered if it was also mages, and suddenly arrows started flying at him from the sky. He figured that all their offensive attempts were being blocked by Elena. Our hero asked who they were and why he was after him. The artifact told our hero that it looks like they are specially trained guys and nothing comes to mind. Stitch replied that nothing at all, and even if their target was him, he didn't know who it could be. Suddenly he wondered if it could be the Herald, but he had been carefully hidden. Even with magic he couldn't be found. Meanwhile, Lilia told her assistants that they had a change of plans and have them take over our hero. She'll dial the girl's ass. Our hero noticed that that monster with 9 eyes had regenerated again, and realized that this place was going completely bonkers. The two girls started fighting in front of the big monster, and suddenly that monster activated its skills. Our hero noticed this, and his opponent told him that there was no time to be distracted by others. Better let him focus on who was in front of him. But Stitch replied something to the same effect. Let him take better care of himself. At this moment, our hero activated the air blast skill and began to push his opponent away. The guy started calling out for help to another opponent, telling him to come up faster. But our hero, even after his attack, was able to dodge again, and realized that Crosswind was now activated. This means that little by little he gets used to its effects, and it is very annoying. That's why I realized I had to deal with those two first, and then think about Elena. Meanwhile, Elena activated a gust of wind, or thought it seems she wanted to increase the distance between them to open fire. So we'll have to see what she can do this time first. But suddenly, Elena was behind her. The girl said just because she has a bow in her hands doesn't mean she's bad at close combat. Lilia replied that it made sense, but she wasn't the type to lose in close combat either. The girls started attacking each other using every possible technique. Well, suddenly Lilia jumped right on top of the monster, and noticed that our hero had activated the electric discharge again. But she thought the magic power was much higher than before. So she shouted to her assistant that it seems our hero is up to something. So we need to block him and stop him by any means necessary. Our hero turned his attention to Lilia and wondered why she was climbing again. At this point, he activated a blast of air plus crosswind, and had a great offensive combo. Stitch yelled for Elena to spring into action, and she fired an arrow straight at her opponent. Lastly, he told his assistant to save Lilia, and the guy obeyed. Our hero picked up a weapon, and said that he had been waiting for them for a very long time, namely, his experience points. He headed to attack the monster and began to activate the devouring curse. He then added for Elena to go to the artifact room while he dealt with these guys in the meantime, but the girl replied that there was no need for that. All the same, after mining the artifact, they would bury them together with this dungeon. Afterwards, Stitch told the story of how he survived. The Herald was too negligent, so he survived. And he doesn't want to do the same thing, and then suffer. So he said not to let the opponents take offense at him, and added that it was their own fault. At the last moment, one of the opponents picked up 2 obscure circles and began to use them. Our hero realized that it seems to be a smokescreen and it is urgent to leave the place. Stitch shouted for Elena to guard the artifact, for that was what the enemy needed. The second opponent realized that now was the last chance, though he wasn't in the best condition. But at this distance, he should be able to handle it. As soon as he took the shot, he realized he couldn't see anything in that smokescreen. Our hero wondered if for the enemy, even the life of his partner was worthless for the sake of goals. Elena began to catch up to her second opponent, and thought she would not let him take their prey. At this moment, the girl activated the strider skill and increased her stride length. Our hero ran up to her and told her to grab the artifact in a flash, and we need to get out right away. The enemy got angry and realized that he would not just let our hero go and tried to catch him. Our hero turned around and realized it was the same guy again and told him to knock it off already. At this moment, Stitch activated his fireball and began to attack the enemy. Toth thought he had failed to complete the task, and wanted Mr. Bullstock to forgive him. Already on the way out, Stitch wondered who these guys were and why they were attacking. But the girl told our hero to calm down, and asked him if he remembered what the archery man had said. So it's not hard to guess that they were originally hunting for artifacts, which is why they went for convergence. Stitch realized that the artifacts were their target after all. He then picked up some sort of thing and asked what it was. But the artifact himself didn't know, and said they should use it sooner, and would finish things. As soon as our hero put the thing on his arm, the artifact asked what he was doing. But Stitch replied that all the artifacts he'd been given, he'd trivially failed to even see them. Our hero was surprised that as soon as he put the thing on, a lot of information immediately popped into his head. The artifact asked if our hero was completely lacking in brains, that he was fawning over others in his presence. He added, "If Stitch repairs the magic and spirit of the artifact, he will no longer be able to absorb it." But our hero replied that he just wanted to learn all the options, because it was too dangerous to rely on the artifact alone. Elena asked if our hero had decided not to absorb the artifact this time, and the guy replied that he wanted to keep it. Stitch then picked up the stone and succeeded in glamorizing it. Our hero added that it would be a shame to just absorb it, and asked if Elena was really into skills. The girl replied that she was aware of this unusual skill, but our hero made it very simple. But the guy reiterated again that he was very useful if Stitch could get stronger. He'd be better off. Especially the strongest artifact he has is the one that speaks to him, and Stitch isn't going to change a thing. After a while, the man met the guys and said he was glad to meet them. But why is it only the 2 of them? Our hero said he was asking for his help, and the girl asked Stitch if he knew who he was. As it turned out, it was a guide, and a little later our hero looked at the map and said that soon there will be a mountain near it. There is a town. The girl asked if this was the mining town he had talked about on the other side. Well, Stitch replied to tell her to wait, because there was something she needed to find first. He added that the city has very strict border controls, so you can't get in there that easily, and they need another way. The girl then asked why our hero had put all these things in the box, and he replied that it was the toll. The man said that the guys were just lucky, because recently there have been fewer visitors, and it's not easy to walk along such a path. So he told them to fly into the carriage where it was too crowded. Our hero got a little pissed off and thought he should at least make a new outfit later. After a while, the man said that the guys could already climb out, because they had come to the right place, and so it was that very town in front of us. The man advised to stop at some inn to begin with. Already in one bar, someone asked if our hero and the same Stitch. It was the bartender, and he said if the guys came in on a normal day, he'd throw a feast. But these weren't the best of times. He added that there had been an increase in monster attacks in the vicinity of the mine. It is good that troops from the settlements have started to gather for raids, but if our hero has a head on his shoulders, he won't surface or get involved. Stitch replied that the choice wasn't a worry, and he wasn't going to stick around. Why he asked for a clue as to when black market blacksmiths or alchemists would approximately appear. The bartender was surprised, and said it seemed our hero had driven into the wrong situation. After all, since the appearance of monsters, all blacksmiths and alchemists now have a hard time due to the numerous orders for mending equipment. Besides, the troops are also hanging around there, so most likely no one will be able to order our hero. Our hero was surprised and asked what he could even buy here, and what all those people who hang around here were selling. The bartender replied, "The blacksmiths are more interested in making custom outfits than taking mass orders. But these are bad times. Our hero understands everything. But he also has circumstances. So he is ready to pay any amount to be guided to the right people." The bartender then replied that he would try to find people, but it was quite possible that such a situation would require more than just money. After a while, our hero was lying there thinking that there was money and no people. Elena came up to him and said that human clothes were a little uncomfortable, but she would wear it gratefully. At that moment, the bartender came up to him and told him he had good news. He added that despite being busy, the two promised to help. So let our hero treat them to a pint of beer afterwards. One of the men asked why our hero was so surprised, if it was the first time he had seen a dwarf. Although people think that dwarves are only good for forges. The guy says it's nice to meet you and his name is Chemist Casper. And the girl next to him is Lena the blacksmith. Our hero also introduced himself and the guy asked, he must have heard by now that the situation is not good right now. Many are working day and night trying to fulfill orders, and because of the military, the black market environment is tough. But someone has to take care of the rest, because that's how the market economy is set up. To begin with, the dwarf asked what exactly our hero needed. The rest they would decide as they went along. Then Stitch handed him his weapon and told him that his friend had made this sword. The girl was surprised and said it was the first time she had seen such a structure. She added that despite this finish, our hero has been able to use it for so long and still wants to add the explosive power of gas here. Lena said that with normal experience points she wouldn't have dared to take on such a weapon. After all, the formula for the gas our hero proposes is not easy to get. Then Lena asked what our hero would say if they swapped the fuel they would use in this weapon for gunpowder. The gnome said it's more powerful than the gas originally available here. It'll be easier to reload. It's safer to move. Our hero told them not to worry about the expense. He would pay whatever they wanted. Then our hero asked if it was still possible to order leather armor. But under the current circumstances, that would be difficult. Lena replied, "If it's not a standard outfit, it's even easier that way. But there is one condition. The customer must personally extract the leather material if our hero gets it. The girl is even willing to sacrifice sleep for the sake of making equipment." The boy wondered where he would get this mountain when there are only mines here. The bartender added that this is also true. Even if there are monsters around the mines, they are all rock monsters. Then our hero asked about that monster that appeared near that gang yesterday. The bartender replied that judging from the way they barely got away, it seemed they had been attacked by a monster beast, for their whole body was scarred. The man didn't see the monster in person, so he can't say for sure if it was rock solid. The bartender also added that he might not have skin. The problem is that monsters can't be defeated with ordinary weapons. But our hero said there was no need to worry, because he was going to make himself a cool outfit for the sake of surviving. Plus, the effectiveness of the chainmail depends on its quality, and the bartender told Stitch to go to that man. He's a guardian of the city, and a very important black market liaison. He knows everything that goes on in the city. Stitch approached him and offered to buy him a drink, saying that interesting monster incident near the mine. The man replied that this is not just some topic for idle conversation, and everyone who is here asks him without end. Our hero replied that he was not asking out of idle curiosity, and asked if the man had personally seen the attack on the workers. He started screaming, saying that he stood there and watched unarmed workers being torn to pieces. He didn't fight, he just ran away like a coward. I'm stopping here. Guys, if you liked this video and want part 2, hit 2,000 likes under this video. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and leave a comment. Until the next video.